Now to talk about Judith. Judith Margolis, Israel-based American artist, book designer, and writer, studied painting, drawing, and printmaking at Cooper Union in New York City. And she received an MFA in Fine Arts and Animation Film Graphics from the University of Southern California. An artist since the age of 3 and reader since kindergarten, books have been the main way to express herself creatively. The resulting work has been exhibited and published internationally. She has lived and maintained a studio in New York, New Jersey, Oregon, California, and now Jerusalem. She has 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild. She also creates graphic narratives and writes for art journals and magazines. Since 1998, she has been the art editor of Nashim, the Journal of Jewish Women's Studies and Gender Issues. Judith has so many exhibitions I couldn't possibly list them, but a few that come to the fore are Jerusalem Biennale in Israel 3 different times, Hebrew Union College in LA, Hebrew Union College in New York, both solo exhibitions. Her work is contained in so many collections, I couldn't possibly list those, but a few include the New York Public Library Special Collections, Yale Rare Book Library, the University of Washington Rare Book Collection, and the University of Toronto in Canada, Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library, Canada. When I think of Judith's work, I think of layers of meaning, from the graphic elements to the story that's being told, to the connectedness of the world at large, and to Judith's personal experience and her personal journey. And with that said, let me say welcome, Judith. There she is. So nice to see you. So nice
That was
to have
fun
you
to
here.
listen to.
It was fun to listen to. It was about you.
Yeah, really.
Anyways, Judith, thank you for joining us from Israel. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
That's great. And I know it's not exactly midday for you. Tell
3 a.m., which
it's
is
3
fine with
a.m.
me. Yeah, I'm a member of the Insomnia Are Us Club, so that's okay. I don't mind.
Well, I know that you're going to be brilliant and amazing as you always are. And as a departure from what we usually do, we're going to dive straight into the work. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you can see it. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, we're together. You can see the PowerPoint. Let's begin. So what we're looking
Okay.
at here is time lapse. It's a story of you. Tell us about it.
Okay, I chose these 3 pictures to begin because literally my earliest, what I think of as art experience, were pre-verbal. I remember noticing how things looked. I couldn't speak yet, but I noticed certain things that looked a certain way. And my memory tells me that we are who we are from very early on. The middle image is from my graduate thesis show at USC. I was in my mid-40s. I didn't get to go to graduate school until my older daughter was in college already. As we all know, that sometimes women's schedules are kind of wrapped around their families' journeys. But one of the reasons I chose this picture is that I was by that time quite involved in the Orthodox community. I had become Orthodox by choice, but my art wasn't modest in the way that one might have expected. So I was already in tension with things having to do with Jewish observance. And the third picture was just taken last year. I live not in the old city, but it's my neighborhood. So places that are historic visitation places for tourists are my neighborhood, and I like that very much.
So we're going to begin our art journey with this piece that's quite
Yes.
dynamic, has a lot going on in it. Tell us about it.
Okay. It's called Twist of Fate, and it very much came about because I had moved to Israel in the mid-90s. There were a lot of bus bombings then. It was just before Rabin was assassinated. And my sense of how things happen, are they by chance or random chance or destiny? This is one of the questions I wondered about regarding, I mean, some people have a religious belief in things, and I didn't quite have that. And I know people who were involved in terrorist attacks, and they happened to be sitting outside on the patio rather than being inside the restaurant, or, do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that was the kind of thing that came for this piece. I'll just make a reference to that, what looks like dice, and you'll
Yes.
see that again. I was studying with Sarah Yadid Schneider, who's a Torah teacher here, and she told me about a place in the upper heavens. She called it Gan Eden Lamala, where energy and light comes from the six directions. And she had given me this schematic drawing that looks like the cube. And she said that when these energy and light meets above, it affects what goes on down on earth. This is a Kabbalistic belief that everything is destined, and as above, so below. So I started for this particular image, which is about obviously some attack, some surprise attack. The idea of casting dice is that it's not by random chance, that perhaps these are destined. I'm working on that still.
You're allowed to continue to mull things over.
Yeah. These two images both are representative of the idea that I have, that there's what we know, and then there's hidden knowledge that we either know or don't know, that there's always something inside. The first one on the left, there's a bird inside a bird. The scattered letters are very much, I like to use that to imply that ideas are unformed, that what we know might be unformed. And the one on the right is a reference to the triangle, is a reference to Har Sinai, and the myth that the Jewish people live in is that we all assembled at Har Sinai to hear the word of God, that everyone was there, men and women both. And so that's something that interests me to
I
consider.
particularly love personally the way you use these letters, and as the way you sprinkle them around as though, and they are evocative of the way ideas flow in and out of our minds, and that this gives a sense, this popcorn effect of the letters in this one. In this case, it's in English, but sometimes they're in Hebrew, and I think it's very impactful. So now we come to the famous branches, and we're going to see them again.
Okay, so this is very much, it's called Awake at Night, and I actually have quite a few paintings that I call that, because I am often awake at night. In this particular one, I use the image of the burning bush, which I have in a lot of paintings. I'm very interested in the idea of it. In this particular case, it's the woman's ideas are keeping her awake at night. But the thing about the burning bush is, from the story in the Bible, is that it burned but did not consume. And so all the different times I use it, I like to have the sense that our creative work or our creative energy burns continually, but it doesn't consume us, and it's always waiting for us.
That's a beautiful thought, and that should be great encouragement to all the artists that are out there, because it does indeed burn continuously, and sometimes you have to learn to live with it, because sometimes it's kind of hot.
So
But
these images again show the burning bush is also like roots, and I'm very interested in roots, both figuratively and metaphorically. But in this particular case, the one on the right, I did for a show about Dura Europos through the Jewish Art Salon. And they had an exhibit that people were supposed to be inspired by Dura Europos, which is an ancient synagogue that had been buried, I think, by sand, and it's in Damascus, and then it was uncovered. And they found on the walls of the synagogue mosaic images of humans, some of them nude, and it completely washes out the idea that visual art is not a part of Jewish culture or a part of Jewish tradition. And yeah, and then the similar burning bush in this particular case seems to be growing out of the woman. And I'm very interested in women's bodies and how women look and our connection to the earth. And in this particular one, yeah, that's what I'll say about it. Oh, and one other thing, the snake on the right of the other one is an energy snake. This is called European Cellar, and it's often I have above and below, what we see and then what we might not see. And in this particular case, what's in the cellar are memories and an image of things that were once beautiful, but perhaps are faded. The stone wall was very influenced by the fact, once I moved to Jerusalem, I was just fascinated by all the stone. And the staircase going up and down is also something that I use often. For me, it represents going down into memory or the unconscious, and then going up into the world or to the other world. You'll
Beautiful.
see what they did.
I love graphically the way this beautiful bouquet is positioned here, and it almost is such a wonderful contrast to the sort of the grainy kind of feel of the stones, and it really each serves to emphasize the other.
The stone was actually part of an etching. So when I do collage, I borrow from my own work, and I
Good for
might
you.
pair up things. This is called, it's actually from a project that was called Women of the Book. I was a co-curator of it, and we took 10 or 11 years to collect work from 54 different women all over the world who each chose a chapter of Torah to illustrate on kosher cloth, kosher parchment. And I chose Shmot, which actually means names, but it's the first chapter of Exodus.
Mhm.
And I think of it as a cast of thousands. A lot of stuff happens, including the original discussion of the burning bush. Moshe is being held by Pharaoh here. And the woman next to that triangle, the triangle in this particular case could be referred to as Har Sinai. And I'm mentioning again that the women were at Har Sinai. The image of the world is there because Pharaoh is considered a representative of Amalek, who it said in every generation tries to kill the Jews. And it happened that I worked on this painting during the Gulf War, and there were a lot of oil fires from Kuwait, and they talked about that kind of damage being done and the attempts to destroy Israel. So I felt like Pharaoh representing Amalek everywhere in the world and in all time.
It's a very powerful piece. And I think that the red figure here, really, if you didn't have it, the blues wouldn't resonate so beautifully as they do. And people sometimes don't appreciate the role of color in communicating a message. And I think you've done that just so beautifully here.
Yeah. Ah. So my husband died in 2005. He was a writer and my soulmate. And after he died, it was really quite a long time before I could go into the studio again. And when I did, after a very long time, I found that I needed to represent, I called it How Things Grow, because after a very long time, I went in and I just started to work, and I left the empty space on the right. His absence was a presence, and I
Right.
really felt that I needed to show that. The figure of the woman, a student of mine had been frustrated with her drawing, and she tore it up and threw it away, and I took it out of the garbage. So that's why the head is missing. And I revised it a little bit. And here again, you see the roots, which if it was turned upside down would look like a tree.
Yeah.
But here the roots are either veins or roots. And I guess I started to work again when I worked on this piece after maybe a year. And I felt like how things grow is that eventually things grow. And I didn't realize it until we put together this PowerPoint that the roots growing will end up being referred to later on in some of the more recent work that I'm doing.
So here again, we have some of those beautiful letters that are circulating. And here we have something that actually has your handwriting. So,
Right.
and the use of the imagery of hands. What does that
Yes.
mean for you?
Okay, the one on the left is a piece that I did. Uh, it refers to the idea of holy and profane, which is something that I think a lot about and have for a very long time. What makes something holy and what makes something profane, which is something very important in Jewish, I don't know what you would, it's Jewish theology. The hand is what we have. I have a friend, a dear friend, unfortunately, who died, a rabbi, who said, she held up her hands and she said, "These are God's hands." And it meant that what we do on earth is what we can accomplish, what each of us are specifically meant to do. So in my case, I write and I draw, and I also pray in my way. And the one on the right, I call In the Beginning. And again, it has to do with the initial burning bush. In this particular case, the roots look like veins, and I
Yes.
deliberately wanted to do that. And the scattered letters are just, we don't know yet what we're going to say or what we're going to know.
I think that if I could add to the concept that these hands are God's hands, I think the artist's hands are definitely God's hands, because an artist is a seer and is a prophet and is a person who interprets the world for us mortals. And in that sense, I think it's wholly appropriate. And when I say holy, I mean literally.
Right. Well, I
This,
like it. It's good, a word that goes twice. The one on the left is called Aliyah, going up, which is actually the definition of the word Aliyah, to go up. And let me see if I can. This is a piece I did for an exhibit at the Ein Hod Museum in Israel. And people who had immigrated to Israel, artists, were each given a typewriter by the museum to do a work. And the name of the show was called Hebrew is a Difficult Language. Most of the people ended up doing sculptures with their typewriter. I ended up taking a photograph of it and using it for this collage painting. It's quite large, and we have some details to the right here from the
yes,
piece. So you see
yes,
very much focused on the idea of language and how we learn what we know. The hands in the upper middle are a traditional Kabbalistic image. The ones on the right and the bottom, right and left and bottom, are from an old typewriter manual, where also they have the letters on the fingers. And the image of the little pieces of coral, the very first time I visited Israel, I was on the beach in Eilat, and you could find these little pieces of coral, and they looked like letter forms to me.
yes,
And then the letter underneath is a kind of letter that I found in a little book called Sefer Raziel. It's an ancient kind of Hebrew. I had a dream about it before I knew what it was. And then a few weeks later, I went into the studio of David Moss, who's a friend, and he had this on his wall. And I said, "What is that?" And he told me about it. So that was kind of interesting. I like the idea of letter forms and it all being about what we don't know or what we do know. There's other images. I wanted to remind everyone that there's going to be links to my work
yes.
in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And any question that you have about any of these images, you could go and find them in the website, or you can ask me if you have other questions.
Yes, Judith's website is quite detailed and extensive, and it's broken down into different categories and themes. And at the end of the episode, we'll post all those links so you can copy them and go. We could never in 1 hour cover everything, so you can
That
go
was our
dig deeper. You
that
can
was
dig.
our big challenge, was what not to tell. So this is another detail from that one that you just saw. And there's a lot of references to hands. And on the right is a piece from the catalog from that show. The essay that I wrote, I had translated into Hebrew, but it was basically about the fact that when I moved here, I did not know Hebrew at all. And when Rabin died, that day I was walking around Jerusalem and I didn't know. I couldn't read the newspapers and I didn't know. When 9/11 happened, I knew what was going on. I could understand the Hebrew on the bus.
Ah,
And that
okay.
was kind of interesting. It's kind of, I don't know, it's good news and bad news, I guess, at the same time.
Now
Ah,
we're going to a completely different style and a
yes.
different kind of influence. So what are these photographs and what do they mean to that piece on the left?
Okay. In my website, I refer to all of these that you're about to see from a section called The Daily News or Making a Place for Peace. And a lot of my work has been reacting to news and media. In this particular case, I was living in Los Angeles, home of the film industry, and this was before the Me Too movement. Those are supposed to be the twin towers of Century City, where a lot of music deals are made. And my idea is that women's bodies and sexuality is sold, bought and sold to sell things, to sell movies, to be negotiated. The name of the piece is Negotiations. And I have on the right the actual literary reference, One is a picture of at that time, the Minister of Finance, who unfortunately I can't remember his name, but that's an actual photograph of him. And the other one is a photograph of a woman in a perfume ad. And I borrowed from media to do this painting.
You know, I'm going to ask you something that I saw pop up in the questions, because if I ask you later, I won't be able to say what it was referring to, because some people are interested in what is the media you're actually using
Okay,
here.
absolutely.
Is
So this
this
particular is oil on canvas. It's oil on linen,
okay?
it's gessoed linen, and it's very large. This one is like, oh, I think they were 10 feet by 6 feet.
Okay, because that's a question people often want to get a sense of, how big are
Yes.
these?
The other pieces weren't quite as large as this. This is a piece called Splendor in the Grass, Bitburg. In 1984, President Reagan went to Germany on a diplomatic tour, and he went to a cemetery in Bitburg and laid a wreath on the grave of an SS soldier. It was a kind of a mistake. He meant he didn't know what he was doing or something. The photograph on the right was in Newsweek magazine. It shows him walking through the cemetery with his advisors. And I ended up doing a large painting that represented this event. And instead of the cemetery, instead of the I'm sorry, my brain just shut off. Instead of the monument, it's a rape. So
Okay.
basically, I made it be that a metaphor or an emblematic image of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, is a rape. And to some extent, the the fact that these politicians or these important people are strolling across the cemetery and ignoring what happened is emblematic for me of how things like the Holocaust happens. I have to say at this point that a lot of the work I did when I would refer to the Shoah, I was always supposed to be in the past. And one of the reasons I call this whole section of work Making a Place for Peace is that when I moved to Israel, it was between the first Intifada and the second Intifada, and we were already having a lot of things happen. And I wrote and painted things then that now are again very relevant. So I'm sorry to say that, but that's the way it is. Oh, one more thing. That piece was purchased by the Skirball Museum in Los Angeles, and as far as I know, has never been exhibited.
It's a pretty powerful piece. And
Well,
yeah, and that's something that you do so masterfully, because it's not just, I mentioned before, it's not just what you're communicating, it's the skillful way that you do it, and the use of color to highlight to emphasize what you're trying to show here, and in this particular piece graphically. But tell us about it.
okay. The piece on the right is an image from Newsweek magazine. I seem to have used Newsweek a lot, and it's something that happened in South Africa. And I ended up using it I call it Dark Continent. And I did it with the idea, again, it's a very, very large painting, 10 feet by 7 feet. My idea is that it could be in any time. It doesn't run out of, it could be in Germany, it could have been in Yugoslavia or Czechoslovakia, or, it was in South Africa. And unfortunately, also it could be in Israel. Without realizing it, because I didn't live in Israel yet when I did this. I did this when I was in the graduate program at USC. The way that I chose to put these buildings, which I made up, you could see in the image on the photograph, it wasn't that. It turns out that the two different buildings are very specific to the way the Jewish houses are and the Arab houses are.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just did two things, and it was done it was done in 1985, I believe. I wasn't living in Israel yet. I hadn't even visited Israel yet, I think. And there it is. It's kind of interesting, I think.
I think that the arcs that you're using here are really creating an incredible contrast, emphasizing the violence versus the static images in the back. So it really comes across as a very dynamic and powerful image of violence.
Uh,
Now, who
so
do we have? Where are we going
yes,
now on our
here
journey?
we have, so the image on the right is a piece called The Song of Songs. And it's in the office of the Dean of Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. And I did it while I was a scholar in residence and an artist in residence at the 18th Street Art Center and scholar in residence at HUC for 3 months. And I was expected to give a gift to HUC, and this is the painting I chose to give. I had been studying with classes with some of the teachers. I think in this particular case, I was studying Megillot with Tamara Ashkenazi, who's a wonderful Torah teacher. And I had, by coincidence, if you believe in coincidence, that's one of my favorite mottos. I was visiting my sister-in-law in Los Angeles, and my brother had just died the year before. And she was going through things, and she came up with a childhood toy of mine that my brother had ended up with. And it was a puppet of a Black girl with a calico dress. And I had drawn it and I drew it and I did paintings of it. And then I was studying Song of Songs, and one of the lines in it is, "I am Black and beautiful." And so I ended up using the doll that I had just rediscovered after all these years for this particular painting. And you could see again, there's the house image and the tree image. The umbrella is about, I think that had to do with a puppet, obviously is manipulated by the person holding the puppet. In this particular case, she's floating with the wind. And I believe I was experiencing in my own mind, struggling with the idea of how much does God take care of and how much do we have to do on our own. And then it's a reference to nature and how much nature acts in our lives. And that will also come up again soon.
So now we come to something that seems like it's for something completely different, and a line drawing. Tell us how did.
It's actually an etching. This is an etching from a book called Underground Dreams of a Cactus, which I did when I had a residency grant at Women's Studio Workshop in Rosedale, New York, upstate New York. And I got to be there for 6 weeks and create a book of etchings. And I got to write the story. And in it, it's about a woman who, this is also on my website, people could see it. But the thing is this, I was thinking about what are the female powers in my life. And the earliest one I could remember in terms of a character from literature or something was Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, who was a kind of badass woman who did what she wanted and was a free spirit in her way. I didn't know the word feminist then, obviously, when I read that book at the first time. And the other one is more, I have to say, transgressive. I'm not apologizing, but here I was being an Orthodox Jew and superimposing the image of a nude woman on the Sefirot, it's sometimes referred to as the tree of life, where the different levels refer to places in the universe. The top is the crown. The two hands are intelligence and wisdom. Around the breasts, I put beauty and fear and love. And around the reproductive areas, foundation, splendor, and firmness, which is a little bit of a joke in my mind because obviously that's something that women might worry about, the firmness part. And I call it the Shekinah comes to visit. The Shekinah is the feminine indwelling of God, according to Kabbalistic ideas, and it's the feminine nature of God. Now, because a lot of Jewish culture and practice has been patriarchal, we haven't heard so much about that, and people have to look for it. Kabbalists weren't mainstream until more recently. Now you find much more of it. Anyway, so that's what this is, and it's an etching. And this is called Waiting to Be Born.
What's it called? Sorry.
Waiting to Be Born, and it's a reference to one of my daughters had Hodgkin's disease, which is a kind of cancer, and I went to stay with her for 6 months where she lived while she had chemo and radiation. And thank God it was the kind of cancer that could be treated. I remember the doctor said, that's the kind of cancer you want to have, which is I collect things that doctors say that I think is pretty strange, but okay. And I had time at night a lot because I'm awake at night. And while I was there, I was working on collages and I started to think about reincarnation. And so I did this piece, and again, I use images that I've used before. On the lower right-hand corner, it's an image from a first aid book called Applying Pressure to the Wound. And it's something that showed up in a lot of my work. I picked it up, the booklet, someone had thrown it away, and I opened to that page, and the instructions for that page was, you apply pressure to the wound and proceed. That's what it said in this first aid book. And I remember thinking that everybody has some woundedness, and what do we do about that? And so for me, I think applying pressure to the wound is doing art. That's how I am able to proceed. But everybody is wounded, it seems. And as I get older, I see that that has nothing to do with how wealthy they are or how good or bad they are. That's just the way it is. So, and
I
here
love
this
that.
kid being born through a kind of heavenly midwife, and you see the skeletons are about to go down that. It's as if it goes around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Your
Life goes
staircase.
around.
So we're seeing again the motif of the stairs, and you've got the stones here
Walls. Yeah,
reappearing, and the branches. And oh,
yeah,
I love all this, all these letters that are expanding, and as if they're ideas that are not under control. But I do
right,
want to say that apply pressure to the wound and proceed should be a
yeah.
bumper sticker. It's
Right.
a it's a wonderful motto to live by.
Ah. So this is a hand-sewn piece called Kriya quilt. When my husband died, he was a writer and an artist, and we were together for 35 years. And he was very accommodating to me of being willing to wear colorful things that I liked. I would often buy him, we've got a lot of secondhand things, vintage things of bright colors. When he died, I found it impossible to get rid of his things. I didn't want to give away his shirts. And there's a custom, well, a lot of people might be aware of it. It's called Kriya. At a funeral, your garment is torn to represent the rending of something that cannot be put together. And I found that I had this a kind of urge to just rip up his stuff. I kept it for a long time. I couldn't give it away. And then I just felt like I had to tear it up. And I started to do that. And I realized that I wanted to sew the pieces together. Now, obviously not all the pieces. I took fragments, but I took some pieces from his shirts and his garments and some things from our life together. I worked on small pieces at a time. I could work on it wherever I went. Here, I'm taking a Amtrak train trip across the country, which I often do, and I could sew while I'm going. And you could see details of the different parts. I sewed it all together, and then I did top stitching, and then I did embroidery on it. It's all hand sewn, and I worked on it for 10 years. By the end, it was like 10 feet by 6 feet. And you could see the part on the left is the back, because I had always been interested in quilting and needlework, traditional American needlework. The back is as important as the front. One thing I wanted to point out, you could see at some of his ties or a t-shirt from when we met on a commune in Southern Oregon, and the marijuana leaf is from then. But one of my daughters, after he died, gave me a pair of pajamas that had a map on it. And she said to me, Mom, you're going to be able to travel and do stuff. And so I appreciated that very much. And actually, it leads us to the next to the next thing I'm going to be talking about, which is maps. I've always been very interested in maps, both for what it describes and for the implicit understanding that things are misnamed and meaning and missing in maps. There's a whole project that I worked on with two different people I like to corroborate. This one is with a woman named Mary Ann O'Donnell, who lives in China. I met her at a residency here in America. She was born in New Jersey, not too far from me. So this map shows where I grew up and where she grew up. And then years later we met, and now she lives in China. So we mailed back and forth to each other rice scrolls, and we both worked on it. The Hebrew here says entering, I have entered, I will enter. And that's a piece from one of the scrolls we did.
It's beautiful, and I love the integration of these letters. What do
Well,
these?
she did that. So
Yeah.
she writes Mandarin. She's fluent in Mandarin. Actually, she wrote an article about, I wrote an article we did together about my work, and it was translated into Mandarin and published in a magazine there, which is really exciting to me. I mean, I can't read it, but I know what it said. So
It's
she would
beautiful.
work on the thing and then I would work on it, and we sent it back and forth to each other.
Beautiful.
These are two more maps. The one on the right is from a project called Gazetteer, which I worked on with my friend C.S. Giscombe, who's a poet. He's a friend who I met in Ithaca years and years ago, and now he teaches, and he's a writer, a poet. He teaches at Berkeley. And he and I collaborated on a project called Gazetteer. He would describe dreams about travel, and I made maps to go with his dreams. And those are his handwriting on it. This is also something you could see on my website, the other ones. But this particular one is called The Map of the Homeless Man. And you could see the character in the lower, yeah, that character there there was a homeless man who was near the studio where we were working, and he was there every day. I saw him. And one day I got there and he had left behind this drawing that he had sat on. It was on his, so I took it and I put it into this piece, and I worked on brown paper bags, which have folds like maps.
I
And the
like
one,
the map of wishful thinking.
yes, so this is another one. This is from a book that I did called Now, Not Now. What I do is I alter books. Sometimes I take a book and I do collages in every page. So this is called The Map of Wishful Thinking, and it's really about, it says, one of the things it says is avoid heartbreak. Wishful thinking of allow companionship, kiss, take a trip. It's kind of suggestion. It was actually suggestions to me for how to
Beautiful.
go on in my life.
I think there are suggestions that work for a lot of people. So now
Ah,
we see you in the landscape.
yes,
So where are
yes.
you?
So this is a place near Arad in Israel. It's overlooking the Negev, and across you could see actually the Dead Sea in Jordan from this place where I'm sitting. And it's near where I used to live. I lived in Arad, and then I lived in a place called Beit Yatir, which was about 25 minutes away. And I loved being near this place. It was the most far away foreign place I had ever gotten to visit. And I would go there before dawn and draw. And I would go early because it would get very hot. The paintings that I did, the drawings and paintings I did eventually were shown at the Yatir Winery, which the Yatir Winery is a wonderful place it's near Tel Arad, and it's near the archaeological sites there. And it says on this one, remembering to be quiet and to listen. The thing about being in places like this is it's not really quiet. There's insects. You can hear the bells of the goats. The Bedouin tribes have goats. There's a little video about this that you could find on my website when you go to the Yatir drawings.
Well, again, you're part artist but part philosopher, which maybe is the definition of artist, because so many of these phrases that you have incorporated are so thought-provoking and make one examine one's own need to be quiet and to listen, or in fact should compel one to do those things. And here where you say coming back again and again, compelled to return, that's so true of so many of us to various and different ideas. And so this is a beautiful, again, scene, but talk to us about the Hebrew that you've why did you
Okay.
do, I mean, what were you thinking when you did that?
Okay, the way I have a lot of the writing, some of it I write, you could see it's my handwriting. Some of the times when you saw the scattered letters, they're rubber stamps, or I use stencils. I do a lot of different ways, or I just draw them. But the Hebrew letters, I have rubber stamps, and it's just the alphabet. It's just the alphabet. I don't form words with it, and I just use it the way it is. And that's partly because I haven't really owned Hebrew in the way that I love nuance. I'm a writer, and my Hebrew is not fluent, even after all these years. I'm a little apologetic about that, as you could tell. I think I want to say about this, and this is really important. When I lived in this area, my husband and I owned a house. It was the only home we had ever owned together, and then he died. And although I didn't want to live there anymore, it was kind of lonely. I couldn't leave for a long time. And because I was there, I was able to have a relationship with this place. And the thing that comes after this, which you'll see, is a piece called Pursuit of Loneliness. And I worked on this for 7 years while I was living at Beit Yatir. I started it on this residency that I did at HUC. And then I just took it with me wherever I rolled it up and took it with me wherever I went for a while.
It was your constant companion.
Kind of, but the piece is, it's called Pursuit of Loneliness. You could see on the left-hand side, I work in a lot of different ways, and sometimes I'll borrow something from one piece and use it for another. And I wrote an article about this early on in the piece, and I realized that it took me 7 years to finish it, and I was in a rush to finish it when I finally did it because it was going to be in the Jerusalem Biennale. You'll see again that you see on the left-hand side in the bottom that square that indicates where things are up above. That part shows about prayer, and the two figures in it are something I took from a martial arts book. It's supposed to be two people fighting, but in my mind, it's what happens inside ourselves, the conflict with our own self. The Pursuit of Loneliness is where I originally wrote it. Whoops.
Sorry, I moved ahead because I thought
It's
we were.
okay. Anyway, so again, you could see that work on the website and explore it more. This is from a piece I did. It's actually a story I was telling. I was telling the story of Sleeping Beauty. And this was when I lived in Ithaca. My daughter at the time was 11, and she liked to wear my kimono. And I was drawing her, and I started to think about Sleeping Beauty. And this is the 12 fairy godmothers posing for their photographs. And I was using images of people from my own family. You could see I'm sitting down with them. These are real people. I got them from photographs. Some of them I didn't know in real life because they had already died. But, and then there's another one, I think.
Yeah.
The one on the left is the 12 fairy godmothers at their dinner party. And I tried to show all the different kinds of people. Also, there's something about the way I have them sitting next to each other and holding each other. There's one over there who's not eating her cake because she's on a diet. And there's my grandmother, that's me on the right-hand side. And my grandmother had died when I was 2, my grandma Molly. And as I drew her hands going through my arm, I really just felt like the hair on the back of my neck kind of, it was as if I was speaking to her and conjuring her up. Recently, someone looked at this and said, oh, that could be like the Last Supper, because a lot of artists take the Last Supper and they put other people in it. The one on the right is from the story, one of the versions of the story. The queen who couldn't have a baby is talking to a frog, and the frog is telling her that she's going to have a birth. Some of them, it's the witch, and some of them it's the frog, and I chose this particular one. So that's called the Queen of Frogs.
Beautiful. And now for something very, very dynamic and almost like got a Matisse feel to it.
Well, the photograph is by Edward Muybridge, who did photographs in the 1870s. He would set up a series of cameras and then have people move, animals and people. He has books. One is called The Human Figure in Motion, and one is called Animals in Motion. And he was able to track how people move. And he's very well known in the world of photography. And I took that particular picture, which I loved, and I reused it for some other things. And here are these women. Of course, they have high heels, and it's quite a large piece. And I just made them. I think of women efforting and doing what they do with great energy, and in high heels.
That comes across. What is the media you've got going on in this?
So this one there is it was gouache and pastel.
Beautiful.
Now, one of the things we're going to see here is that when I talked about working on brown paper, the piece on the left is a piece I did on brown paper. It's a kind of small sketch almost. And it shows these girls on the roof and they're reaching up. The tree is like a woman. that was also in the Pursuit of Loneliness. There was a tree that was also a woman's body. The one on the right is called Infinite and Yes. And I was commissioned to do work for the Hadassah International for a patron's piece, you know, a gift for a patron. And it was right after my husband died. And I was very, very grieving. And I was doing this image. I did a whole bunch of images for them to choose from. At the time, I felt that it was too bereaved, and I didn't even offer it. And then some years later, it got chosen to represent something of great joy. It was part of a show that was in China, in Beijing, and I ended up calling it Infinite and Yes. And so I find that interesting that you never know. So somebody saw that small image of the girls on the roof because it was published in a book. It was published in a book called Train Music that I did with my friend Cecil Giscombe, who I had mentioned. And I was working on it in my studio, and it was hanging underneath the picture of the women leaping. And I realized when I saw that that was the picture I wanted to do. So the bigger piece that I did was a print of that small sketch, and that I sold to the woman who commissioned me to paint it. And then on the right is the what came from this, which is putting those two images together. And that makes
Beautiful.
much more sense to me now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go, as you talk about this, I'm gonna go through some details because we do have some questions I want to
Yes.
get to. So
Okay.
talk about this and I'll scroll through the details.
Okay. So this is called This Making a Place for Peace. And I did it during the Second Intifada. And the thing I wanted to say, I guess, which is relevant to, it's a book. And I worked on the dummy of a book about voting. So in those days, that's one of the pages you could see the text and it's painted over. And the one on the left is a drawing I had done of women learning how to shoot, and a gun. That's an Uzi, which is not actually used anymore as far as I know, and that image of the monkeys, say no evil, hear no evil, see no evil, which is again how we survive in Israel is by not.
And speaking of that, I want to go to your to this piece, which is
Okay, yes.
very, very powerful.
So this is the most current thing I'm working on, and in fact, if I get it done, I'll be able to submit it for publication tomorrow. I call it Holy Crap. I was in a Zoom class with a lot of people, and obviously the person didn't know where I lived. And the day after October 7th, I was reporting to the class what was going on. And this person wrote to me in chat, "Wait, you live in Jerusalem? Holy crap," he wrote. And I realized that that was the title of the thing I wanted to talk about. And I said to the teacher that I'm so upset about what's going on, I can't concentrate. And she said, "You have to draw it. You have to draw what happened." So I started to work during the Zoom class. And at that same time, she teaches in Kentucky, in rural Kentucky. She started to have a siren for a tornado warning. And while I was drawing this piece, she was saying the same thing about her tornado warning. So that's for my drawing. I took a photograph of it and I took the words from what I did to give it to her as well, because it's the same thing. What I began to think about was the difference between having a warning to warn you against being attacked by enemies and having a warning about nature. And what's the difference in that? So
This is some more talking
the
about the
collage on
weather.
the left says, what I just said is a collage trying to understand the world by talking about the weather, which is kind of what I just did. And the image on the right is that when
I'm
I
sorry. Sorry,
went
I snuck it away from you
it's
because
okay.
I want to come to this place where we're talking about
Okay,
what's going on now.
you're right. Okay, so what happened to me during the last year is that people carrying guns became a very common thing. In Israel, unlike in America, people can carry guns and they're vetted very, very diligently. So we end up not having those kind of school shootings and things. People have a gun of these sorts if they're in the army, and they have to have their gun with them. And so I think you could go to the next page. What I started to do during this time, it was the months following during the war, is I needed to concentrate on something that was alive. And I decided, I took on a challenge of drawing every day this avocado pit. And every day it would grow more roots and it would start having little leaves. And as the news came in and as the horrible news happened, I would concentrate on this pit that was growing. And somehow I found it to be like an arena of calm. And I would alternate in my mind dealing with what was happening in the world with what I was doing. And so this is how my piece ends. It says, no matter how murderous or stupid or foolish or wrong or heartbroken or kind or forgiving or generous human beings might be, these seeds want to grow.
And that is a beautiful, beautiful inspiration for us all, because with everything that's going on, we can all look to nature. I know I myself have a similar mantra where I say, the river doesn't care, the trees don't care, these seeds are going to grow. And I think we can take a lot of hope from that. And your work has certainly shown us a way to take hope, take heart from your roots that grow up and the branches that grow down. You've got nature intertwined with all of your images. And I want to thank you so much for taking us on a journey of your work. And I want to ask you some questions that people have been putting in the chat. For example, one question is, when you have an idea or concept to create your work, how much research do you do beforehand? And, you can think of any of the pieces as an example. Any of them come to mind.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of studies for a piece, or do you just embark?
I embark, and actually it's interesting. It's almost like the research. When you saw, I found images in a magazine. I use things that I find a lot. Sometimes it's my own stuff that I've torn up or it's not good and I use it another time, or I find images. Sometimes I'll take pictures off the TV or at a movie, but usually it's drawings that I've done. And research, I don't know. I guess I do research. Research doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't,
Well,
I
I think you're
never
more of a
actually.
collector.
Well, I have to do this now on a project, and sometimes research takes you to a place that's very dark, and that's a hard place to go. So I like to make things up, I think.
And you do that so well. A question is that, do you have a studio in Jerusalem that welcomes visitors?
Yes, absolutely. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment. I live by myself. The entire apartment is my studio. I'm supposed to have a kitchen and a bedroom, but basically I work everywhere here, and people are very welcome to come and visit. I love it when people do that. So.
Another question is, what's next for you? What's next on your drawing table? What are you planning to work on?
Well, I have been working on a project called Family Secrets, and I got interrupted from doing that because of the war and doing this holy crap piece. Uh, all the people in my family of origin are gone, and I am doing work about the family secrets that we didn't talk about, that we weren't either allowed to talk about or nobody spoke about. And that's it.
All right. Well, on that note, I
Mm.
want to thank you so much for giving us your time, for working so hard with me to come up with a journey that we could all go with you. And I think you did a wonderful job, Judith, in paring down a lifetime of work. It was not easy. Am I right?
I know. Oh, there's so much I'd like to say, but I really do invite people to look at my work, stroll through. The website is like going to a museum or a bookstore. There's a lot to see. And there's other links to books I've published. So, yeah.
So on behalf of Art and Scroll and on behalf of the American Guild of Judaic Art, I want to thank you so much for being our 28th guest. And thank you for spending your time with me. And you did a beautiful job touring us through. So I hope you feel pleased.
Do I have time to say one thing?
Oh yeah, it's your moment.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say something about, I was hoping in telling people about the work that I still find out things about the work that I didn't know. And that happened this morning. I was showing the Holy Crap piece to my class, and it's going to be published in a school anthology. It's not a
Oh,
Jewish context. It's the School of Saw, Sequential Artist Workshop, and they publish anthologies, and I'll have a little piece of it in. because it's not a Jewish context, what I would say about it or how I would describe things will be different than someplace else. But the pits that I sprout, I use yahrzeit candle glasses for them. Now they're
Really?
recognizable to Jewish people who have these yahrzeit. They come in a glass. They're either tall or not tall, but they're very identifiable. Even if you take the paper off, I know when I use them after, and people say, "Oh, that's a yahrzeit glass." For the class, I didn't call it that. For that particular text, I just said a glass. I didn't say a memorial, a yahrzeit glass. But I realized that I didn't realize it when I was doing it. When I chose that, I didn't think to myself, what's the meaning of using a yahrzeit glass? That it has additional resonance for me, the roots going in and the having the faith of this growing thing. It's like we're being
Beautiful.
fed by the people that came before. That's what I think about it. But I didn't
Very
realize it
beautiful.
until today. So that's good.
Thank you so much again on behalf of our team. And with that, I have a few things I want to do. I want to tell people that we do have a new episode coming on January 29th. There are so many artists that we're talking to right now. I can't tell you because it's a surprise. But if you want to write that down and save the date, that is when we'll be meeting again. But I have some fabulous artists that are excited to join us and very proud to be part of our community. So we look forward to that. I'm going to invite now my partner in crime, Karin Glickman, without whom this would not even take place. Karin is the magician. And yeah, and I want to invite Brian just to wave at us. She's our chat master, chat master. Now you look a bit like a hip hop artist there, but thanks, Brian. Thank you so much. And Karin, you want to say a word or two?
Thank you so much, Judith. Oh my goodness, this was like amazing. You are amazing. I want to be you. Can I just be you? That's what and you can be me if you want. I don't know. Maybe you don't, but anyway.
I would warn you off that, but okay.
Thank you. I'm as soon as I can, I'm coming to Israel and I'm going to visit your studio.
I have a guest room with books in it.
Well, Shelly and I will be coming together actually, and we'll
Okay.
probably bring Bran with us. Thank you so much. That was fabulous. Thank you to everyone tonight who came to watch this great show. It will be available the recording will be available on our YouTube channel at some point. So look back if you want to watch that again or share it with a friend. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, follow our YouTube channel. Thank you to our supporters. We do this out of the love of our hearts, nothing more than that. We are not compensated. Our artists do it for us for the same reason, for all of you. So thank you for your generous donations. You will receive an email from me in the next couple weeks, just with the information to how to reach Judith and access her website and such. So thanks again.
Okay, and what we're going to do is Judith has agreed to hang out and answer questions directly from people if they'd like. I'm going to stop the share, and Karin is going to give you the ability to turn on your camera and to speak to her directly or just to say hello. That usually takes a couple minutes. I will be posting this video, so Judith, I'll do it faster than usual for you because I know
Okay,
you have a
good.
lot of people who didn't come.
Well, a
And
lot of people here didn't want to see it at 3 o'clock in the morning,
no, I
unfortunately.
don't, and I can't imagine why they don't want to spend time with us. I see Elizabeth has her hand up, but I
Yeah.
can't see her.
Oh,
Uh,
I can see you. My video is a little off, but I had just thank you. This was so interesting. I always like to hear what's behind an artist's thought process. So this was terrific. You have a lot of energy for 3 in the morning. And I wanted to know, there was, as we were proceeding, there were two pictures, and one you didn't get to talk about, a photograph that was right next to another picture, where to me it was, I think about October 7th. And I was wondering, it looked very peaceful, but I was wondering if those were rocket contrails or anything, or I was
Yes.
projecting.
No, it
Because
wasn't a rock contrail, and you know the name of contrail, which I love. It was after the class that I stepped out of when the teacher had said to me I have to draw that day. I walked
Mhm.
outside And the sun and the moon were in the sky at the same time with the contrail between it. And it was a very significant moment for me because I was reminded what I do is I have to look at things and notice how they look and draw it.
Yeah.
That was how I got into drawing the avocado pits. So I'm glad you noticed that. And it was an important moment. I mean, I took the photograph and it was weeks later that I put it all together. That's what often happens. So.
No, thank you.
good to
That's what I
know.
saw. So thank you for answering that. Thank you.
And I had to look it up to know what the word contrail was. So you knew it. I'm impressed.
That,
I'm sorry
you
we
know,
had to zoom past that, but I wanted to get to the questions. There
Yeah.
is one question, another question about your work it said, in most of your work we are viewing is mixed media. Are you
Yes.
using chalk, pastels, watercolor, pencil, and ink? And I think I know the answer to this, but what would you say?
You mean what kind of material do I use?
Yes.
Everything.
Are
I've
you
painted
using,
oil paint on linen, gouache. I like gouache a lot. Gouache is a kind of very heavily pigmented watercolor, that water-based paint. The Impressionists used it a lot, and it's I just love it. The color that you get from gouache is similar to when you're working with oil.
okay.
Now, I've worked with acrylic as well, and I learned how to do that. I learned how to make the acrylic look like oil. Oil, unfortunately, is very toxic. So I ended up kind of phasing out using oil paint. And I love collage. Collage for me is like dreaming. We take a picture from here and a picture from there, and we put it together into something that makes new sense. And I just do it all the time.
What kind of glue do you use that doesn't break down?
Lately, I've been using glue stick.
Just a
because
glue
it's
stick.
But I used to mix up, I used to use actually acrylic medium with a brush.
Mm-hmm.
I just use glue stick. What could I tell you? It's just like a lot of things. And I also started to work much smaller. When I started to work on books, for a while, my first husband and I and our two kids lived in a school bus. We were traveling around. It was when gas was only 19 cents a gallon, so it made sense. And I had to work very small, and that's when I started to do books. And so I like things that are very mobile. And when I go out, I always have a bag of some art supplies that I could sit at a cafe, draw, whatever. It's kind of an addiction, actually.
I think it's a way of life. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't know, has anyone else anyone else want to turn their camera on?
Yeah,
And
I'd like to see people's faces. That would be nice.
people don't usually like to. They like us to be doing this. Oh, there we go. We've got someone,
Hey.
some brave
It's a
person.
friend. It's a good friend.
Some people up in the middle of the night. I don't know. Anybody else up in the middle of the night, or is everybody?
No, well, I think that's daytime for him.
I
No, it's,
can't figure out how to turn my
Anybody in
camera.
Israel, from Israel here? No? Okay.
Um, Pamela, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say a shout out to Judith. It's been a while since I've seen you in person. This is Pamela Sweet.
Wow.
And I just love your
I'm
work.
glad you're there.
I know. Well, hopefully I'll get to Jerusalem soon and I'll come see you.
Better. Okay, good.
Yes, I've always appreciated your work and it was great on this
Wow.
more about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judith's
Delta-
work is
Delta-
really like a labyrinth because you can dive into it and goes deeper and deeper. Susan, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say hello to my
Hi.
dear friend Judith. And
Yes.
I'm in New York. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
And I'm glad I had to miss a little bit of the beginning. Well, I didn't have to, but I lost track of time and missed a little bit of the beginning. So I'd love to get the link so I can get the whole
Yes.
thing and also share it with some people who I know would enjoy it.
Susan
You
is the
will
one
get,
to take
you
the
don't
line.
have to be sad about missing it because you can see the whole thing.
That's what I want.
Okay.
Actually,
Thank you.
I just like to
really-
compliment Shelley and your team. This, I do a lot of these and your production was really flawless. You started on time, you moved it along. Production value is great. The audio is great. It was like really, kudos on that. That's not easy to do. So
Yehuda, you have no idea how much tonight of all nights, we appreciate that comment because we are not professionals. We're lay people who come from different backgrounds, and we try our hardest to run something that starts on time, ends on time, and is enjoyable for everyone, even if it means I have to move a slide on someone.
Right.
Great
Yeah,
job.
you
Great
work with,
job.
and as you said, you work with Judith to sort of help her. I've known Judith for, I don't know, 40
A
years.
very long time.
So I've been through a lot of this, and to sort of see it, her whole life's work succinctly, but that was actually
Seen it all.
nice to see.
Not an easy,
Maybe-
it's
Huh?
not an easy job to take
No.
someone who's as prolific as Judith and to narrow it down, then narrow it down to what really needs to be seen. So I thank Judith for her patience because it is a tough job. And I thank you so much for your kind words.
My pleasure.
Oh, Suzanne, yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed getting to know your work tonight. I especially love the way you used the feminine form. And I really appreciated how you reimagined the Kabbalistic tree of life on,
Yes.
I can't remember the
That's
name,
pretty
like Shekhinah.
transgressive, you
There were
understand,
two
of course.
different women in the picture, and
Yeah.
one had your interpretation of the tree of life. And one of the things I've always struggled with, just because the depictions as it's usually presented come from a man's perspective, and I'm always confused about Malchut, which men always seem to put it at the feet, but I've also heard it refers to the womb. And I'm curious, like, where you think of Malchut, because I didn't see
Malchut
that
is the
specifically
crown.
labeled.
It's the crown.
The crown, so that Keter and Malchut just
That
all
was
together.
the crown of, it was actually, it's called The Underground Dreams of a Cactus. And in that particular book, it's the Queen of Cactus. And she has, that's from the book. You'll have to go onto my website and see the whole, because you could see the whole book there. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. I very much enjoyed your work tonight.
I said it's very transgressive what I did. I really was Orthodox for 25 years, and I was kind of in recovery from that, and now the pendulum is swinging back again. But now I'm old enough, so I don't care what people say about me.
Gee,
I'm
I
all for
think
heresy.
I feel similarly. Cindy, did you have a question or your hand up?
Yeah, no, I just really a comment. A couple things. I'm a printmaker. I'm also studying Hebrew, and I'm, Jewish learner, as I'm sure many of the people
Where
on
are
the
you
call
located?
are. But I'm in San Rafael in the Bay Area, and I hope
Great.
you remember this person. The person who forwarded me the email about this is, I think, an old friend of yours, Mimi Harrison.
Yeah, I know Mimi from
Ithaca, from Cornell.
Yes.
Yeah,
I just
I
saw
know
her
it was a long
recently.
time ago. Yeah,
Wow.
so she
Were you
sent
in
it to
Ithaca
me,
then?
and no, I live in San Rafael in California, but I was recently in Israel, and I hope to be back. And I love
okay. Well,
love
next
the
time you'll have to call.
presentation.
You never
Love the
call, you never
presentation.
write.
Love the work.
Yeah,
Somebody,
I'll be there.
I just want to mention, Judith, somebody did say they're watching from Tzfat. Somebody's in bed and watching.
Is it Abraham?
Somebody is also up during the night.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you all. It was a great presentation, and
I appreciate it
I'm
very much.
signing up for all of them.
Do
Okay?
that.
Thank you. And
Do
I'm
it.
knitting at the same time, just like you are. Who's the other
Yeah,
knitter?
We love to grow our audience, and the best way is through the people who have attended, and they are the people who do come back. Sarah, the person who's up in bed is Sarah Bassan. Sarah, anyways, she may not want me to read that out, but it was in the chat.
Okay, I
And
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you so much, everybody who was brave enough to turn their cameras on, because we know we still have some people around. And thank you for joining us. I think that, and I think that's what we got. Anything else, Karin?
Your invitation on my part for people to be in touch and to visit or call or ask questions or anything. I really would love that.
Yeah,
Any time of the day or night, remember, because I'm awake usually.
And we did post all of those links, Judith. They were all posted in the chat. So people, they can, if they know how to copy and paste, they can copy those out right now before the before this show is over. In fact, when we
You could
post,
you could save the whole chat actually by just clicking on the dots at the top.
you could do
Yes.
that, but also
I
when
will send you that. We'll
when
send you the chat, and we'll send the email out in the next 2 weeks with all of the contacts.
yeah, we'll put all that in the what we send out next. Usually we send something that thanks people for coming. And
Can I
indeed,
say
thank
one more
you.
thing? One
So,
more
of
thing.
course, of course.
When I speak to people, and it's a big group, and I don't know who's there. If I told this to Shelley one of the times we spoke, my agenda, if I have one, is that everybody has creative work in them. It might be, you don't, and it waits for you. I've had too many people say to me, oh, my sister was the creative one, or something like that. And if any of you have any desire to draw or sing or knit or dance or do anything that feels creative, I would say do it, and don't worry about whether you're good about it or not, how good you are. Just do it. And it's really waiting for you. And that's really important. That's so important. And it's very healing. It really is. Just
Well, you
remember,
know,
apply pressure to the wound, figure out how you do that.
exactly. I was going to say that, but you know what they say? When you're feeling down, buy art supplies.
Ah. Easy.
Anyways, you've inspired a lot of people, Judith. We're so grateful that you shared your wisdom, your knowledge, and above all, your art. And we hope to see you again. We hope you'll join us again, but maybe not in the middle of
Absolutely.